Okay, this was a game that was played between way stronger players than previous games. Player that was playing white used to be as high as 2400 in his prime. And black is our good friend. That's an aspiring young player that's trying to become a master soon, hopefully. So let's see what we can learn from this game. This is a very, very long game. It's a 97-move game. So I'm only gonna go over the most critical moments. And we're going to look at this from Black's point of view. Surprisingly, this game contains a few mistakes that we can learn from. Some of them are tactical mistakes, and some of them are positional mistakes, which I don't agree with. So the player plays white, he plays his favorite opening, which is Trumpovsky. And of course, main line is 94, that's the most challenging way to face it, but e6 is just fine. Here, white normally would react with e4. At least, I played e6 myself several times, so here white played knight f3, and we got a really interesting hybrid position, which is basically Queen's Gambit declined, main line, except the knight, instead of being on c3, this knight right here, it's on d2. So it's a bit unusual. So here's another lesson, another advice I can give you guys is try to have a reference point. So, for example, if when I see this position, my reference point is the Queen's Gambit decline with knight on c3. So the next question I ask myself is, how does having knight on d2 change the situation? Does it benefit white, or does it benefit black, or does it make no difference? When I play this as black, and I play this all the time, I always go knight e4, which is a Lasker variation adopted by Vishay Anand in his World Championship matches against Topalov. Very, very good, very solid line. So my first question here to myself is, can I just play knight e4? Is it somehow worse for me than in normal Lasker? I think having knight on d2 does not really change much. I can still play knight e4, and the reason is, again, black is a bit cramped for space. So just like that elevator analogy, we want to unload some people. When you trade a couple of minor pieces, the position becomes close to equal. So usually white would take here, and then if they might take here, something like this. At that point, the knight is on c3. So usually black would take knight takes c3. So that's a move that I would make, just based on general positional considerations. Now c6 is also not bad. It's a different approach, where black is just trying to hold the center. And here is the first move that I did not like. Taking on c4 here. I think this move is not necessary, and the only side that benefits here is white. Taking on c4 improves white pieces. In particular, the knight that's not doing much on d2 now has a route to the e5 square, which is a critical square in Queen's Gambit decline. So no need to give up the center yet. Instead, I think black should be looking at making some kind of pawn break in the center. Either prepare e5 if possible, or c5. And here we have a situation, again, where white is facing a decision point. He has two possible options, either to trade dark squared bishops or to decline the trade. Well, to me, it seems that white should trade the bishops, as that would expose a weakness of dark squares in black's position. What do you think?
I don't know, I might be inclined to play bishop g3 actually,
Yeah.
because
Why?
I'm not so sure where the counterplay is coming from. Where's this bishop going? And I have some invasion on d6 perhaps, and I just think in general, well, obviously black's bishop on c8 is horrible.
Yeah, but
And you will also have a better bishop on g3 than its counterpart. And if you trade, it kind of makes black's position a little easier, perhaps.
okay. Well, That's a good thing about chess. We can disagree and we
Yeah.
can prove it on the board, unlike in real
I
life.
think bishop e7 is actually kind of a mistake,
Okay.
personally.
Well, when I saw this game, I really thought that white should trade, and so does the engine.
Really?
Yeah, if you believe the engines. But it's not a blunder or anything like that. It's just a preferred move. Okay, so here white got a very strong knight on e5, and black started to doing some counterplay. So here white should have played e4, I think, to misplace black's d5 knight, which is a pride of black's position. It's the best placed piece. Force him to go to c3. And here actually, interesting situation. So black ends up winning the pawn, but white has much better placed pieces and a strong center. Positions of this type happen quite a lot in Catalan, where black is up a pawn, but white has some dynamic compensation. Now, it takes a correct evaluation and some level of courage to go for this kind of position, to give up a pawn for compensation. A more standard decision is to not do that, so white just plays queen c2. And again, here I think white should have played e4. He ended up trading his nice knight for the worst piece that black had, which immediately gives black a better position. Black's position is better due to the fact that they got a passed pawn. White does have two bishops, but most of the pawns are placed on one flank, and bishop on g3 is like shooting into nowhere.
How did this happen?
So
Like, his position was horrible, and now he has a passed pawn on a3.
yeah, so now we see how black managed to outplay white, and he's going for the endgame, and of course his main advantage is the passed pawn on the a file. How to convert exactly is a question. So I think at some point black, maybe here, maybe a little earlier, black should have tried to push a pawn to a2 to make it really, really dangerous for white. Trap at rook on a1, and maybe if a plan to promote a pawn doesn't work immediately, again use the fundamental idea from my system, Nimzovich's book, create a second weakness somewhere else. But unfortunately, somewhere here, right here, black made a blunder. So the best move was to play rook e8, and then of course still preserve winning chances. But after the inaccurate move rook b7, which is a tactical blunder, white ends up winning the pawn. So now we have a different type of game. The game goes for two results. Either white's gonna win or it's gonna be a draw. So some moves happen, both players try to improve their position more or less. Okay, so what should black be doing? What should white be doing? So white, I think, wants to keep as many pawns on the board as possible. Every pawn trade, I think, unless you win a pawn, every pawn trade increases the chance of this game being a draw. Also, I think white does not want to go into rook endgame. Just like I mentioned in the previous game, rook endgames have a tendency to be drawish. And I think bishop is better than knight. But what white does here is that he makes his trade and ends up giving this game away eventually. So here, of course, black cannot take on h3 because of king g2 traps the rook. So here another critical moment. I think white can just take on h5 and force his trade of pawns. I think the pawn on h5 could be that potential weakness that I was talking about, that white can go after and win it. He finally does that. And here f5 is another move I did not like. I think the more correct plan would be to bring the king over and try to win the h4 pawn. Again, you don't want to trade pawns. Now I'm kind of like explaining my main ideas. Here again, white misses a win. This was pretty straightforward. Tactically, he should play rook c2. and then black's going to be in the zugzwang. Black has to move a rook. After black moves a rook, he just goes rook c6. Once the e-pawn falls, he has connected passed pawns, and the win is pretty elementary. But instead he trades pawns. And now here things become hard. Now from black's point of view, the classical advice is you gotta, in the rook endgame, you gotta keep your rook behind the passed pawns. I think going to c3 was the most optimal route. Your rook is going to e3, and from e3 you're watching after e-pawn, and at the same time you keep an eye on the h-pawn. So rook c5 was a bit imprecise. Still, even here white has good winning chances, I think. But eventually he ends up executing a completely wrong plan. So the good part about his position here is that the black king on g6 is cut off from the e-pawn. By playing king to f4, he allows black to approach that pawn. And actually, black had a forced draw here. In this position, simple king f5. And then what you want to do is you want to use your rook to attack the e-pawn, capture it, and then the h-pawn cannot promote. So what you do is if white pushes a pawn, you just stop him from the e8, you get in front of the pawn, and then you're right in time to win the e-pawn, and you're in the square of the h-pawn, and that's a pretty simple draw. After king f7 again, things are not so simple. But finally, white managed to push the h-pawn. When he pushed the h-pawn, he stalemated himself. It actually happened in one of my games, in one of the Vegas tournaments here a few years ago. So, so pretty long game, and this game is more complicated and does not have mistakes as obvious as the other games, but I think it's still pretty instructive.
Switch.
Let's take a break.